All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I have 4 o'clock right on the dot, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our meeting number 2 of the statewide book study for specially designed instruction. And we are currently doing the book on specially designed instruction, Increasing Success for Students with Disabilities by Ann Benninghoff. Hopefully all of you have received your book by now. If you haven't, please email me or Jennifer Duncan separately and we'll make sure that you get that. If you joined the book study after registration had closed, if you would like to go ahead and purchase a book from Amazon, you're welcome to join us. And I know that we have several of you doing that. I also want to tell you again, just a big thank you for your understanding and your kind words. We do have a beautiful little granddaughter here. Still needing a little bit of prayers from you, if you don't mind. She's doing pretty good, but still on oxygen, just a little bit early. So, but she's doing wonderful and she's beautiful. So thank you so much for being patient and waiting for this date. So today, before we get started, I just want to make sure that hopefully you have your book near you. If you don't, we'll still be able to do some things, but hopefully you at least have some paper, a pen, or something to write with. And if you are a special educator, hopefully you were able to get an IEP accessible for going through some of this today. We won't have too much time during this to go back and read any of the book. So hopefully you're doing your reading ahead of time, but we should have a wonderful session today. So with that in mind, today you'll see that we're going to go over part 1, Envisioning SDI, the introduction and chapters 1 through 4. I do have a change and I'll send this out in your follow-up email to go ahead and try to get this done, hopefully before the majority of you go on spring break. I know that it might coincide with some of your spring break, some of these dates. So I do have a couple of makeup meetings there on the 20th and the 25th. So hopefully we'll get you on one side or the other of your spring break to be able to do a makeup meeting, since I had to miss that one. So anyway, I will send this out in a follow-up email so that you have it. Let's just talk a little bit about PTSB and STARS credit. I know we've had a lot of questions about that. All of the requirements are that you, of course, read the book and that you participate in the 4 one-hour virtual meetings. And that's why I have 2 of those makeup dates for you if you did miss one, especially the one that I had to reschedule. You will receive a half credit of PTSB or 7.5 credits for STARS. And there will be an attendance form that will be given to you at the end of each session that will be required for you to fill out so that you can get credit and show that you were in attendance. We do have a way of verifying, but we will need some other information from you in that form. So make sure that you do fill out that form if you are seeking credit. There is no requirement for you to get credit. You're able to just join us and enjoy the learning. We also have a certificate of attendance that can be sent to you. So within that form, make sure you check the appropriate box of what you're seeking. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Ann Benninghoff really does, I love that she says, before we can even start, we need to envision specially designed instruction. And Joel L. Barker said that vision without action is merely a dream. And action without vision just passes the time. But vision with action can change the world. And we recognize that this vision can definitely get blurred at times by trying to manage your high caseloads. Sometimes you have varying grade levels that you're working with and disabilities. But Ms. Benninghoff reminds us that specially designed instruction can help provide us with that clarity of purpose that we need to bring our goals back into focus. So today, as we go through this, I just want you to stop and just ponder for a moment. How do you envision specially designed instruction? Do you know what it is and what the difference is? And then how, not only that, but how do you envision SDI for each one of your individual students? Because as we know, that should look different. It should be individualized, right? So right now I'm going to go ahead and hopefully play this video. It worked when we tested. So Susan, if you'll just let me know if it doesn't work. But this is a video from Anne, and she's going to talk a little bit about what is SDI. I know we talked a little bit about that in the introductory meeting, but I want you to hear from her. So we'll go ahead and play this.
Hi, everyone. My name's Anne Benninghoff, and I've been a special educator my entire career. And along the way, as a special educator, I have tried to do great instruction for my students always, but it wasn't until maybe halfway through my career that I really understood that my role was to be providing specially designed instruction and what that meant. And so I want to share with you just a quick overview of what those three words, specially designed instruction, what that term means, and how we can use that information to make sure that all of our students are being successful. So according to the federal legislation, SDI is defined as adapting content, methodology, or delivery of instruction. So I think of these as like the three whats. This is the what of my job. What am I supposed to be doing on a daily basis? Adapting content, methodology, or delivery of instruction. But just as importantly, the law gives us three purposes or three whys. So the three whys, first, to address the unique needs of a child with a disability. And I always suggest that people put a little asterisk or star there and add in the phrase IEP goal-based. Because for something to be specially designed instruction, we are, the vast majority of time, we are working on IEP goals, or there is a link in some fashion to the work that we're doing with IEP goals. Second major purpose, according to the law, is to provide access to the general ed curriculum. And that word access is really critical. This is what makes inclusive practices so much more aligned with what the law's purpose is, to try to have students have full equitable access to general ed curriculum, to the general ed teacher who probably has a unique expertise in the curriculum, and to all the other students that might bring some higher level thinking and discussion to the topic of whatever the curriculum is. And then the third why is also important, in order to meet the standards. And if you notice the verb there, it doesn't say to access the standards, it says to meet the standards. In other words, when we provide specially designed instruction, the vast majority of our students with disabilities should be meeting the standards that are there for the grade level. If they're not, it may be because we are not adapting in the ways that we need to. So this is just a quick overview of what SDI is. You can find more information in my new book, Specially Designed Instruction. See you again soon.
Okay, give me 1 second here. I'm trying to answer some questions in the Q&A as well as look at this. So there we go. I had a couple of people in the Q&A say that they had a hard time hearing me. Can I get a thumbs up or something just showing that are the rest of you having a hard time? Okay, so you can all hear me. Great. So I want to just take a second and look at this quote. This quote started, Anne has it in her book, from John Catafo, and he said, "You can't teach a child to swim by taking them out of the pool." And Anne added, "nor by just throwing them in." I want you to just take a second and make a few little notes right here. What does this quote mean to you? And how does it relate to what you know about SDI? Take just a moment, jot down your thoughts. If you are in a group with a few people, I'm going to give you a little time to just chat about that. So I'm going to give you about a minute to think and to answer that on your own, and then a couple of minutes just to go ahead and discuss that. Yeah, Trevor, you're right. It is a great analogy of looking at our students with different needs. Thank you guys for going ahead and putting something in the Q&A. That's what I was going to ask you to do. If we were in person, I would have loved to have just some open discussion about this. So Cindy said you can't pull kids out of class and expect them to know what's going on, and you can't just leave them in class expecting them to get it. Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. There's so many times that you know, I've had different colleagues in the past think that, you know, just because they're in gen ed, well, they should just be getting it. Or if they have somebody sitting next to them, maybe they get it more. You know, our SDI makes a world of difference. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that here coming up. Yeah, thank you guys for adding to that. So let's go ahead and move on. We are going to talk a little bit about the three whats. And I'm sure that you noticed during your reading that Anne talks about the three whats, and then she talks about the three whys. Right now, we're going to just go over a little bit about the three whats. So the whats of SDI is adapting content. You may need to adapt methodology or the delivery, maybe all three, right? If you were able to join us just recently, we offered a 3-part series from Dr. Tessie Bailey on these very topics. And if you did not have a chance to get that, there is a link that I'll be sending out to you from our Wyoming Instructional Network that will give you access to the recordings of that training as well as the handouts. Her handouts, we are actually going to be using some of those. So I sent that in that email to you that you received prior to this meeting, and you should have links to those, and it will give you that direct link to the instructional network. If you go down and you find the adapt content session, you'll see a handout, and just click on that link. Hopefully you've all printed those out and have them handy, because I really want to talk a little bit more about that today as we dive into this. And so, but you know, this part too, like, I just want to know, how many times have you heard or thought, well, I didn't know that he or she could do that? Because it says most will not need adapted content in order to be successful. Instead, they will need changes to how they're being taught rather than what they're being taught. So sometimes the content adaptations are not always necessary, but the how, right? And so the other thing that I love that Ms. Benninghoff brought up was being really wary of lowering expectations for kids. You know, sometimes I think we get caught up into thinking, my goodness, that's just going to be too hard for them. There's no way that they're going to be able to do it. And yet somebody else comes along and gives them an opportunity and they shock us, right? I have story after story of students, of my own students in the past who, you know, I've been guilty of thinking that maybe they wouldn't be able to do that and not even offering them that opportunity. And then, you know, once someone brought that to my attention, realizing I will never do that again, because I would never want that to happen to my child or to, you know, any of my other students. And so make sure that we're not lowering those expectations. Of course, we're not going to just throw them in, like that quote said, right? We're not going to throw them in and expect, but we're going to support them along the way. And so just be sure. I love that John Hattie's research, if you're not familiar with his research, he has a lot of different meta-analysis. And one of his on the teaching practices, he identified that high expectations is one of the most impactful things teachers can do to bring about significant growth. And I believe that is very true. Research says that, and the effect size of 1.44, this is how well students believe they will do, and that's a strong indicator of how they'll actually perform, how well they will actually perform. Look at this. What do you notice here? Look at the effect size. What do you see? It's the same, right? One can predict that student learning will be increased when teachers explicitly promote a growth mindset and include activities that help students recognize their expectations for their learning and what they can actually do. It's called student visible learning. We don't have time today to really go into that, but if you haven't looked into that, I would definitely encourage you to go back and look at that. It's called, again, student visible learning. And so it definitely makes a big difference in making sure that not only are we encouraging that growth mindset, but that students can actually, we help them find a way to see it within themselves, because, you know, we can't be along by their side forever, right? And they're going to continue to grow and to move into those other grades and schools. And, you know, sometimes they even move states. So we need to, as long as we have them, we need to help plant that seed for them so that they can start believing in themselves, that they can do things beyond what they originally thought. I love this quote also. Additionally, let's not forget the word adapt might even mean that a student needs enriched content. You know, many times we see that just because they have an area in math that they're struggling doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to struggle in reading, or vice versa, right? And sometimes we create behaviors based upon what we're assuming. You know, there's that assume-aside again, that Dr. Bailey likes to talk about. But when we assume those things and we think that, oh, well, if they're struggling here, we'll just go ahead and make all these accommodations, they don't necessarily need that. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite, right? They need enrichment instead of intervention. And so some of those behaviors can definitely be avoided with addressing all of the needs of the child, and make sure we're identifying correctly, right? So what you think definitely matters. I want you to take just a minute or two and answer this questions. Are there any practices needed to change in order to commit to high expectations and standards for all of your students? So think about, especially the student that you've pulled the IEP for today. And if you don't have an IEP, just think of your students or any other students in your classroom that you are over, and think about, are there any practices that you need to change in order to have those high expectations? I'm going to give you just a minute to jot some notes down. Or maybe you've seen that in the past, right? If you have, and wouldn't mind sharing some of that in the Q&A. Definitely not looking for specifics, but would you think that maybe your SDI, would it be your content, your methodology, or delivery? What do you think would need to change in order to have those high expectations? I love that. Tammy said, I think too many of us start with sticking to our high expectations, but get worn down over time. We need cheerleaders throughout the year to encourage us to keep upholding those expectations. I agree. I would say, I'm glad you brought that up, Tammy, because really that is what I'm going to talk about here in just a minute, is about teaming, right? That's going to be really important for us to keep that. Seeing a lot of great things here. Yes, teacher attitude.
Dina, can we just remind everybody it's the Q&A and not the chat? It is correct.
Yes.
The chat is disabled. You need to use the Q&A. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the chat, I can send things to you for you to be able to get links, but you will not be able to type into the chat. You'll have to do it into the Q&A. Thank you, Susan, for that reminder. Yeah, I think sometimes we do get stuck in ruts sometimes, right? Solid co-teaching cooperation. Yeah, and know your students and their needs, their individual needs. I love it. Thank you guys for putting some of that in there. A lot of great ideas. I wish we had time to go through all of them. You guys are sending in some really great ideas. If we have time, I'll go back. I want to talk just a little bit about this. You know, we know that we need to start with our students' present levels. And of course, we have to start with all of the evaluation and things, you know, to be able to get to those present levels. But I want you to just take a look at this visual. We see where our student is currently performing, right? And then we see our grade level standards. What do we see? What do you think is going to help us get there? It's definitely going to be our specially designed instruction. And I don't know that I realized how important this part was. And I didn't have a very clear understanding when I first started teaching. And so I feel really strongly that this year, as we've really continued to talk about what specially designed instruction is, I know that many of you probably have been teaching for years, but as I at least felt, every year I felt like I learned a little more. And even working at the department here and the things that I've learned, I continue to learn. And so as special educators, we work in this gap, right? We teach through the gap. We don't jump over the bridge or try to go around it, because if we do, we're going to miss out on providing that specially designed instruction. SDI is the bridge between present levels and grade level standards. And then as special educators, our job is to determine exactly what skills that student needs in order to close the gap to meet those grade level standards. We definitely need to look at that evaluation report, right? It describes the needs, the areas of need of this, you know, for special education. Without that, and without a comprehensive evaluation, we really can't determine what those needs are. And so we're going to look at the PLAF, right? We're going to look at that and see exactly where they're performing in all those areas. We're going to look at their goals. We're going to look at what's the, you know, with all of those things of knowing what skill gaps they have, not just trying to come up with a goal based on the standard, but what skill gap are they missing in order to achieve that standard? So in that, we're going to determine whether we need to adapt content, methodology, or delivery. We're going to make sure that we're addressing those unique needs, right? And all the while doing that to, of course, ensure that they're getting access to the general ed curriculum. Actually, I'm going to go back one slide. I want you to just take a moment to, if you have that IEP in front of you again, just take a look at the PLAF and take a look at what needs have been determined. What are those unique individual needs of the student? Consider academic, social emotional, behavior, and all of the needs that you think are, that you can see there in the PLAF. Take a moment and do that.
Hey, Dina, it seems like a large amount of people cannot see anything posted in Q&A, and I've tried everything I know of. I don't know if there's
I don't think they can see the Q&A. I'll have to, they can't see the Q&A. It's just for the panelists.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you should have had a little bit of time to take a look at that PLAF. After you've considered all of those areas academic, social emotional, behavior, and functional areas, do the goals address those skill deficits? And then looking at that, at those goals, I want you to just start thinking and starting to have your wheels turn about what SDI is currently being provided, and does the specially designed instruction, does it actually meet the needs to be able to close the gap? If it doesn't, make a little note there so that you can come back and discuss with the team. And so some of these things I want you to be able to just take a look. It's not to call anybody out, or, because trust me, looking back at IEPs, I can definitely say there would be areas I would go back and say, you know what, I need to beef up my specially designed instruction in that area to help this student make adequate progress. And so that's what we're going to do as we look through here. Some of these are some of those questions that are on that handout from Dr. Bailey. So when we look at content adaptation, some of these are questions the IEP team should consider as they're going through that. And I would definitely say, I hope that you'll print these handouts out and include those in your team meetings, because I think it makes a big difference so that we're not missing anything as we go through each of these sections for as we consider what our SDI should look like. So, how does that disability impact the child's access and their progress in the general ed curriculum? What do they need to be taught? And then what do they need to increase their access and be able to participate in the gen ed curriculum? Are there other things that we could be doing to have them be able to participate in that manner? Of course, we definitely want to make sure, as this is an IEP team decision. And so we need to make sure that we're discussing these things with our team and not making any kind of unilateral decisions on that. But, I think these are good questions to bounce off of our teams as we're going through each one of those areas to ensure that we are making those appropriate decisions. I thought this was interesting too. This is, based on research. It says for about 85% of our students, the general education setting works to meet grade level standards. So, again, making sure we're giving adequate supports, not just putting them in there, but do they have adequate supports in order to be successful? And then this one is on delivery. So there's one for content, one for methodology, and then one for delivery. And I won't take the time today to go through all of those, but definitely I hope that you'll take especially the IEP that you've pulled today, and start thinking about some of these questions. And if there are things that pique your concern or your interest, that you'll take it back to your IEP teams for further discussion. So the 3 whys, we know this as special educators, but I think sometimes it's good to just kind of refresh our memories. Some of you even made comments in the Q&A about almost exactly this quote: every student can learn, just not on the same day or the same way. We know this, right? Even all of us, if you were to put all of us in a room right now, I guarantee you we would all come out and say, we don't learn exactly the same way either, right? And so we need to be mindful of that for our students. But the 3 whys of SDI, the first one, to address the unique needs that result from the child's disability. We want to ensure that they have access to the general education curriculum, and we want to support that child in meeting those standards that apply to their same age peers. So this, you'll hear Anne throughout this book. I love the way she puts this. She's, she said 2 of the questions she asks herself every day is, and this is one of them, what am I doing that's special? If we're just doing it a little louder or a little slower than what's being provided in the general ed curriculum, that's not SDI. You know, are we just providing accommodations? That's not SDI. That student probably just needs a 504 if they just need accommodations. So what are we doing that's special? How does it and how does it address that child's unique needs? Is it intentional? I want you to take a second and go to pages 20 and 21 in your book. I'm going to give you just a moment to take a look at these questions. It's down at the bottom of page 20. I love this book. I think that there's many different books out there on SDI, but the thing I like about Anne's book is that it's, first of all, a quick read. She has a lot of examples. She has a lot of graphics and a lot of practical applications that can literally be turned around and used in your classrooms tomorrow. But these are some good questions. I'm going to give you just a moment to go page 20 and 21 and look at all of those questions. Okay, the majority of the questions are here on your screen. I left off two, but I want to talk about them just a little bit because I want you to think about this. The last two say, is it growing a skill that will be transferable or generalizable? You know, this is really important. And sometimes we don't always think about this when we have these little students in pre-K or kindergarten or even, you know, up to 6th grade. But we are literally needing to help build their independence. We are needing to help them to be able to transition into functioning adults at some point. And if we're not doing these things back when they start in pre-K, kindergarten, and I know, you know, this, I know that you know that, but sometimes we lose focus when we're just trying to focus on what they have to do right now for that grade level. But these skills that we're building, you know, whether they be functional, executive functioning skills, whether they're academic skills or behavior or social emotional, every one of those are going to help to increase their ability to have those skills be transferred as they continue to grow and as they get older. And so, you know, we want them, of course, our ultimate goal as teachers, as parents, as grandparents, you know, as aunts, uncles, whatever the case may be, as educators, we want them to be able to be successful when they leave us in, you know, in the academic world. We want them to be able to have enough skills to be able to get a job and enough skills to be able to, you know, maybe go to college or a trade school or whatever it is. And so, you know, what are we doing now to help them make those skills be transferable? All right. We've kind of done this a little bit, but if there's anything else, what skill gaps, you know, and then considering all those areas, we've already done that. So the next, this actually comes from Lenore Knutson from Pangora Consulting, and she talks about the 4 R's. If there are things that you identified in that IEP that are not being addressed, either addressed at all. Sometimes we've seen that when we've, you know, through monitoring or different things. How many times have we said throughout the PLAF that this child has some behavior issues, and yet it's not being addressed anywhere in the IEP? or maybe they've got some serious social emotional things going on. It's not being addressed anywhere in the IEP. Attendance is another big one, right? And so we need to make sure that when we're seeing those needs in the PLAF, what are we doing to address them? So we look at the 4 R's here that that Lenore talks about, and they are reconvene. If you see things like that, we need to reconvene the IEP team. Does it always have to be a full IEP team meeting? Not necessarily, but depending on what it entails, it may need to be a full IEP meeting. So reconvene, review, re-strategize, and revise. I love this because I think that many times we think that we need to wait until that annual IEP. Of course, we do not. An IEP team meeting can be called at any time that there's a need that arises. And so definitely if there's something that you're seeing that has not really been addressed or addressed effectively, we need to do these things. We need to reconvene, review, re-strategize, and revise. The other part that I don't want to overlook this part. I love that she talked about engagement and disengagement of students. You know, learning should be fun, whether they're in kindergarten or they're a high schooler. You know, learning should be fun. And I know that if you can think back on when you were in school, and whether it's in grade school, high school, college, whatever it is, you know, when we got a professor or a teacher that just made learning almost miserable, we didn't want to be there. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at those things. We want to look at the components of engagement. And the 4 here are emotion, student interest, understanding of importance, and a sense of efficacy. Why are they learning it? A lot of times students want to know why they're learning something, right? We want to know why we're learning something. We don't like busy work just to have to do it either. And so I know that there are some things we have to do, and you know, some things that we have to be able to show we know. But and of course, sometimes students don't like that part. We have to do those things. But I think if we take a look and make sure that what are we doing to ensure that our students are engaged? How can we include that in our SDI? I think it's going to make a really big difference, whether they're in interventions, whether they're in enrichment. I think it's going to make a big difference for our students and their progress. So when we talked about, as we mentioned a little bit earlier about teaming, somebody had posted something about, you know, making sure that the IEP teams are on the same page. You could not be closer to the truth, for sure. You know, effective teaming plays a critical role in supporting our students and supporting their progress. If we are not a team moving forward and making these decisions for our students and supporting them, it's going to not be definitely as effective as it could be. She talked about in her book, all of this information can be found from pages 34 to 44. And so it's forming, storming, norming, and performing. I loved that. Those were some things that when we talk about just even teaming alone, we have to get through a few things. She talked about 4 gates from Britt Andriata. She's an expert in neuroscience, and she had put together a framework about when and why our brains emit neurotransmitters that are crucial for learning. And we know this. We need serotonin, oxytocin, and cortisol. They're all necessary for learning, right? And these 4 gates, I won't take a lot of time, but I would have you go back and look at that if you didn't go through that part. You know, the 4 gates, the very first one, we're going to talk, I'm going to go through in just a minute. We'll just briefly go through those 4 gates. But I do want you to take a moment, turn to page 34, this teaming I quotient. I don't know if any of you kind of took this little quiz before this meeting. But I'm going to give you just a minute to look over that and just see. We won't. I'm not going to go down through the whole thing, but just take a glance and see if anything pops out at you. So page 34. You guys can definitely check off the very last one. It says, I participate in professional learning opportunities so that I can better help the team accomplish our goals. You're doing that right now. And I know that many of you value professional learning, but I love that there's different things like I persevere through difficulty. I follow the team develop norms there's things about communication. I think it's just a good reminder of we all need to be the best team players we can be in that IEP team. If not, there's a breakdown in our teaming, right? So that first gate talks about safety and relationships. What do we know about our team members? What are their strengths, their weaknesses? Are we all valuing their ability and their willingness to participate? Do we listen? Do we all have a voice in that IEP team meeting? And what do we have as problem-solving processes? Many times we fail to have some of these things in place. And so when we have problems come up, it makes it really difficult to work through those. I don't know if you've ever been in an IEP team, had an IEP team that sometimes they work really well together and sometimes they have struggles. And so I would, definitely encourage you to go back and take a look at some of these ideas about teaming, especially if you're having any of these kind of IEP team issues. Gate 2 talks about purpose and the clarity of purpose. Do all of the members, not just you as the special educator, but do all of the members understand the meaning of SDI? And does everybody on your team understand their roles and what's expected? Making sure that those IEP goals are addressed. And what are we working on? How often are you working with your general educator to ensure that whatever that lesson is for that day, for that week, and the upcoming lessons, what have you guys had those discussions and collaborative meetings to talk about that? Some of you are fortunate enough to have full co-teaching going on, so that's wonderful. But what are those things that are missing that we need to make sure that we're doing? Do we need to have some special training in order to provide SDI? And not only are you're the one that's going to be designing it as a special educator, but when we have others who are helping to support that SDI, do they need special training? Are we remembering to do that? The belonging, collaboration and communication are definitely key to success, right? We need to make sure that you have some kind of system in place, whether it's online, through email, a Google Doc, or whatever kind of system you use. Of course, keeping in mind privacy for that student. And making sure you're not only just having some sort of a system, but does everybody know like the norms about using it? Like how are we going to, and what are we putting in there? When are we checking in? And of course, making sure everybody has a voice. That's really key. The peak performance is gate 4. This one is once you've already, once you've already got all those other things in sync, it really does become an opportunity for you to gain peak performance with your team. You've already got the trust down, you have mutual respect, and people feel safe in order to take risks. And that's going to be really key for you to be able to come together as a powerful IEP team. And of course, parents being included in that, right? We want to make sure that that it's a safe place for them to be able to share their concerns, us to be able to share concerns, and that at that point you're all committed to make sure and make sure that you celebrate those successes, even those very small steps. I know sometimes it seems like, well, the gap is, it seems 4 foot wide, and some students have just a few, maybe a foot to go. But all of those successes should be celebrated, no matter how great or how small. And it's really important for those parents and for those students to feel that you're celebrating all of those successes for them. All right. I feel like we it's kind of been a whirlwind today, just trying to go through some of those things. I hope that you've had a little bit of time to read the book and to go through each of those things. And if not, I hope that you'll have a little more time this coming week to be able to do that. We're going to plan to meet on the 13th, 4 o'clock, and we're going to go through part 2. And that's going to cover chapters 5 through 10. And so again, those makeup meetings are here on the screen, March 20th and the 25th. And those 2 days, both of those makeup meetings will be the same content. So you don't need to come to both meetings, just one would be sufficient for that. And I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for your time. Again, I know I've said it before, but I truly do believe that I know how important it is to for you to have your own family time and your time to plan and all those things. So I appreciate your time today after you've spent a full work day helping students and helping them to be successful. So thank you so much for being here. This next slide I'm going to pull up is going to be your attendance form. Again, this is really crucial if you want that credit. So make sure you fill out this form. There's going to be a QR code here, and then I will also put the link in the chat. In fact, I'll do that right now. So that attendance form is there. Again, only if you need credit, okay? But if you would also just like a certificate of attendance, go ahead and fill that out and we can get that to you. All right, I'm just gonna look back here while you guys fill out that form and see if there's anything that I didn't answer.
Someone wants you to repeat the makeup days, Dina?
Okay, let me just go. It's March 20th and 25th. Same time, 4 to 5 o'clock. And I will send all of that information in your follow-up email. You'll have that. And yes, this presentation will be sent out after. We'll have that in that same link that you had for Tessie's information. It will all be there on the Wyoming Instructional Network.